and I'm the director of Giggles Clinics. So we'll be presenting on the topic about the influence of gut microbiota in future health. Now, we all know that gut microbiota is something which is being studied extensively, and a lot of research has been done on about gut microbiota on the health, not only on the related to the pediatrics, but also to the adults. So in today's presentation, the time limit which is given to me around 20 to 25 minutes. So in this, we'll try to cover out as much as possible about the role of gut microbiota on our health. So a brief introduction about the microbiota. What exactly is microbiota and what does it consist of? So microbes inhabit all the mucosal surfaces in the body. We know that mucosa formation is very, very important for each and everybody, which acts as a barrier to prevent infections in future life and as well as in the present scenarios. And it's very amazing to know that microbes outnumber our cells by 10:1. So you can see, or you can imagine yourself that we are more of a cells or microbes rather than a human body. So the DNA is the dominant of the DNA of the microbes dominate our body because of the ratio of 10:1 in our body. Now, these microbiotas, they do play a very important role that affect the host health. And there are a lot of ways in which they interact, either maybe through the role of epigenetics, maybe through the diet which we take, the intrauterine period, the epigenetics. Nowadays, there is a lot of concept what we talk about epigenetics. Epigenetics basically means that how our environment affects our modification of genes. Till now, we had been discussing about genetics, but now there is a new research going on, epigenetics, how our environment, our thinking, our thought, our emotions express and affect our genes. And the way the genes are being expressed, that will definitely affect the gene expression of the microbiota, which in turn can affect the health of one's individual. So they are very much important, as I have told, that how they can influence. So they are very much important to play an important role in regulating and managing the digestive system, the various inflammatory diseases, the allergic diseases like asthma, obesity, type 1 diabetes, and not to forget and not to mention the neuropsychological disorders like autism and ADHD. So this is the importance of these microbiota in our health. And they can impact the health right from the fetal state. Fetal state in the sense when the mother is conceived, when the child is right in the womb. From that time only the development of microbiota starts, and it can affect the individuals right up till the end of his life. And these microbiotas can influence the body in different ways, in depending upon the stressors, depending upon the positive aspect which is being given to the development of the microbiota and their growth throughout the life. So first of all, there is a thing what we call as colonization. Now, colonization is something which refers to the development and growth and multiplication of the microbiotas. Now, when the child is born, during that period, the colonization is very, very important. And that colonization plays a very important role in future colonization of these microbiota, which in turn can affect our health. This is what we call as microbial diversity. Initially, now the period of 2 to 3 years is very, very important. We'll be seeing why it is important, because that is the period where the microbial diversity is equivalent to the microbial diversity of an adult. If a child at the age of 2 to 3 years has the maximum and best microbial diversity with the best number of beneficial bacteria, then definitely the microbial diversity of an adult will be comparatively much better than compared to an adult of another person. So as a result, the prone to various diseases, as we have discussed, like that, obesity and etc., can be reduced to some extent. So this is the diagram which is being showing about the microbial diversity from the birth to the age of 2 to 3 years. As we can see during the birth, the microbial diversity is somewhat different, which is predominated by the enterobacteria. But when we come to the age of 2 to 3 years, it is predominated by the bacteroids and lactobacillus. Now, this is the time period where the microbial diversity is equivalent to an adult. So this 2 to 3 years is what we call as the most crucial period during which the microbial diversity can affect one's health. So microbial and the host interaction plays a very important role in what we call as a developmental trajectory. Rather than saying a developmental trajectory, we use the word microbial trajectory, because this is the period during which the microbial diversity keeps on changing and fluctuating. And definitely during this period, if the child has been a bad neonatal history, or if he's been exposed to an ICU care to a very long period, if there are a lot of antibiotics, hospitalization, if the mother care is poor, if the mother has taken a lot of antibiotics, it can definitely affect the microbial diversity during this period. So talking in terms of nutrition, it is very, very important. During the antenatal period, during the period of first 1 to 6 months, or maybe first to 2 years. So that is why we talk about breastfeeding, why it is important. We'll be discussing in future slides what is the role of this breastfeeding in initial and how it can influence the microbiota. So as we have discussed, early microbial colony is the foundation of microbiome for life. Now, there is a term what we call as intrauterine hypothesis. What are the factors which can affect? We'll be seeing. So now, now it's a very broad topic. When we talk about gut microbiota, it's a very broad topic. We can talk on endless number of hours on this topic, but to limit to today's presentation, we'll be discussing only on the 3 most important aspects, that too from the nutrition point of view. First, the factors which can affect the gut microbiota in the womb, that is before the period of delivery, that is before the child is born, then at the time of birth, and the important thing that during the period of birth to 2 years, that is what we call when the child is being introduced to oral feeding. So what are these factors? These 3 important factors can affect the gut microbiome diversity, microbial colonization, and as a result can influence the future health of a child. So now we'll be discussing each of these parameters in little detail. First of all, we'll be discussing about the intrauterine factors. Now, among the intrauterine factors comes the placenta, amniotic fluid, and the mucosa. Now, initially, decades before and decades back, it was considered that intrauterine environment is very much sterile. Means to say, it doesn't harbor any pathogenic, any non-beneficial or beneficial bacteria. So, when the child is there in the womb, it is completely sterile, free of infections. But now this theory has been challenged. In 2008, a lot of literature and research has been done. And there is a hypothesis, what we call as intrauterine hypothesis, which states that intrauterine environment is not sterile. It consists of both pathogenic and non-pathogenic bacteria. And those pathogenic and non-pathogenic bacteria can increase in the diversity, increase in the number, depending upon how the child, how the mother is being exposed to the nutrition, to the diet, to the antibiotics. So as a result, and very interestingly, some research was done. They inoculated some bacteria, they inoculated some probiotics into the mice. And when the offspring of the mice was born, they found that it was containing those microbacteria, or it was containing those beneficial bacteria. So this itself indicates that it is not sterile. Now, what are the other factors which can affect these intrauterine growth of bacteria in the uterine period? So as I've discussed, it contains both pathogenic and non-pathogenic bacteria, which has been challenged. So along with this, as I've told, that antenatal diet is very, very important. If the mother has been exposed to a lot of stress, if she is not taking a lot of diet properly, balanced diet. Now, there is a myth, generally we belong from an Asian country, and there is a lot of myth that pregnant mothers should take a lot of high-fat diet. Now, high-fat diet is not considered to be good for the microbial diversity. In fact, it has been considered to decrease the growth of beneficial bacteria and to increase the growth of non-beneficial bacteria. Now, beneficial bacteria are lactobacilli and bifidobacterium. These are the 2 most important, which are very much important for the early colonization of the beneficial bacteria. So as a result, balanced diet containing adequate amount of nutrition, carbohydrate, fats, and proteins is very much important for an adequate weight gain of the mother and for the beneficial growth of the bacteria. So coming to the second most factor is the mode of delivery. Now, we know that everybody knows that cesarean, and the normal delivery. Now, nowadays, earlier during the ancestral times, maximum number of time, 80% of the time, the delivery used to happen through normal delivery. But nowadays, because of the changing in the lifestyle, the stress, that is what we had called 5 minutes back, the epigenetics, how the stress can influence your expression of genes in the microbiota. Because of those factors, nowadays, more and more pregnant women are going for an elective CS, or what we call elective CS. And nowadays, there is a term what we call as, earlier there used to be medical indications for the cesarean delivery. But now there is some indications like cesarean delivery is being done on maternal request. So you can see how the trends are being changing towards the cesarean. But definitely, those things are affecting the gut microbiota and can affect the growth of the child in terms of diseases it's affecting in future life. So why is that cesarean is being more, increases the chances of probability of going for the child for neurodevelopmental, asthmatic, and allergic conditions, and why it influences the gut microbiota in a negative way rather than a positive way. So the reason why it happens, because during the cesarean, the child is being born, it is being exposed to the skin of the mother. Now, the skin of the mother contains a lot of bad bacteria. They don't contain beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. As a result, the chances of exposure to non-beneficial bacteria is much higher. Now, when we talk about the normal delivery, when the normal delivery is being happening, the child is being exposed to the normal vaginal secretions and the normal vaginal beneficial bacteria of the mother, which are predominantly consisting of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. As a result, the birth canal is consisting of a lot of beneficial bacteria. So this plays a very important synergistic role in influencing the growth of the beneficial bacteria and also improving the nutrition, the immunity of the child. The other thing which is most important is when the child is born, the breast milk versus the formula feed. Nowadays, again, if I talk about the stress, the lifestyle, since we are more into the Western lifestyle, so more and more child being exposed, being fed to formula feeds. Now, although because a lot of advancement in research and science, formula feeds are being made as much possible, as comparable, as compatible to the formula feeds. I mean the breast milk. But there is a one peculiar property of the breast milk which it contains called as HMOs. HMOs, we call it human milk oligosaccharides. Now, these act as prebiotics. No doubt, nowadays formula milks have been being fortified with they have been FOS, GOS, the fructooligosaccharides, which also act as a prebiotic. But they don't have that peculiar property of the HMOs. Now, what are those peculiar properties? The first and foremost important thing is it acts as a prebiotic for the growth of beneficial bacteria, lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. HOS, FOS are also prebiotics, but they don't act as a prebiotic for the growth of beneficial bacteria, whereas HMO acts as a prebiotic for the growth of beneficial bacteria. That is one most important thing. Second most important thing is it favors the colonization of the beneficial bacteria, which we have discussed. Other thing is formula feeds, they lack HMOs. They are mostly consisting of FOS and GOS. Along with that, they may consist of Lactobacilli reuteri, which is considered one of the most advanced and I would say diverse probiotic. But those typical characteristics which the breast milk possess are lacking in formula feeds. Now, why this breast milk is considered to be very good? It is because of the peculiarity of this HMO. It acts as a pathogenic, it acts as a barrier towards the pathogenic infections, towards the pathogenic bacteria. It also helps in establishing the gut microbial diversity and favors early colonization of bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. It also helps in maturization of the immune system. So these are some of the peculiar properties of the breast milk because of the presence of HMOs, which favors and insists that breast milk should be given continuously for at least for the period of minimum of 4 to 6 months. So this is the structure. I don't want to go into the detail, but this structure clearly demonstrates that HMOs have a typical, hexagonal structure. It's a 3-dimensional structure. If I compare it with the GOS and FOS, which are considered to be synthetic or plant-based prebiotics, they are basically have a linear structure. Because of these changes in these structure, they favor as a better prebiotic for the beneficial bacteria. So if we talk about the nutrition aspect, here we talk about the nutrition aspect. The breastfeeding plays so important role, and I have not touched upon the other factors, the role of antibiotics, the infections. But if we talk just solely about the this nutrition, it's very, very important in influencing the microbial diversity. Now, another important thing, if we talk about in terms of nutrition, is complementary feeding. Now, what is exactly complementary feeding? Complementary feeding means we start weaning off the process of breastfeeding by the 6 months and start introducing the solid feeds. Now, why is that happening? Why is that 6 months limit is given? Why we can't do the complementary feeding at 4 months? Why we can't do the complementary feeding at 8 months? Why it is that 6 months? Why we are so fussy about that 6 months? The 6 months is logically been explained. The reason is because initial first 6 months is the period where the child requires the protein intake. The protein intake in the breast milk will somewhere around 1.2 to 1.8, which is actually very much feasible for the child growth. And if you compare the protein content in the formula feeds, it is much beyond 1.8, which is not feasible. As a result, the child may go into the obesity. The weight gain will be very, very high. He may appear chubby, he may appear very good, healthy, but actually he's not healthy. It's going into an obesity because of the high amount of carbohydrate and proteins with the formula feed contain. Now, when we come into the 6 months, complementary feeding is required in the form of solid feed because the protein intake increases from 1.8 to more than 2 grams, which cannot be fed and which cannot be compensated by the exclusive breastfeeding. That is why we have to switch to the complementary feeding. Now, this period of switching of complementary feeding is very, very important because it can affect the microbial diversity. It can affect the growth of the body of the child because here the amount of nutrition in form of carbohydrate, fats, and protein is required is changing gradually from the initial first 6 months. So it is very important to go into an appropriate complementary period of feeding. Now, again, nowadays, there are two types of complementary feeding, responsive feeding and demand feeding. Now, demand feeding generally happens, we just running behind the child and giving him the feed every time. So those things actually doesn't work. We have to go for a responsive feeding. Where the child demands for himself, then we have to go for the feeding, which is actually a right way. But now, because of being exposed to, a lot of screen time, because of the COVID times, the scenario of this complementary feeding is also affecting the microbial diversity a lot. So till now we have discussed about this, how this food and the environment affects the microbial diversity and promotes adequate amount of bacterial growth to help in maintaining a gut. Now, gut has been considered to be a small brain of a body. Serotonin is a hormone which is responsible for the relaxation and calmness of the body. We all know that it is produced by the brain by a part of hypothalamus, but very less of know that 90% of the serotonin is produced from the gut. That is why if your gut is healthy, it will help in maintaining your brain in a more calm and relaxed way through what we call as GB or gut-brain axis. So if this microbial diversity is affected, whatever may be the reason, but if it is affected, it can cause a lot of disturbances in our body. It can affect the brain, as we have discussed. It can affect the neuropsychiatric disorders like ADHD, depression, autism. It can cause skin allergic manifestation like eczema, dermatitis. It can cause asthmatic changes. It can cause obesity. It can cause allergy. So this is just some amount of important things which we have mentioned in the slide. The list is endless. But since we have restricted our topic in terms of nutrition, so because if the nutrition is compromised in any way, from the period of the child mother is conceived till the child is born, up to the age of 1 to 2 years, all those things can affect the child. Because why we are taking this first 1,000 years of life, that is up to the period of 2 to 3 years, is because generally these manifestations appear in the child when the child reaches the age of 3 to 4 years, like autism. Generally, the people don't able to see the symptoms of autism till the child is 2 to 3 years, skin manifestation, asthmatic problems. So that is the importance of keeping the microbial diversity in a very harmonious or balanced state. So these are the list of medical conditions which we have discussed, which can cause as a result of microbial diversity. We won't be going to the details of this, but from the nutrition aspect, we should know that it is very, very important in maintaining an adequate nutrition to the mother and the child in the first 2 years of life in order to promote healthy growth and healthy life of a child. So just to conclude about the presentation and to summarize what we have discussed about this. So we have discussed basically that the microbiota is very, very important. And there are 3 most important factors which can affect the microbial diversity in any throughout the life of the child. It can be either the intrauterine environment, it can be the mode of delivery, it can be the type of feeding which the child is being exposed immediately after the birth and during the first 6 months of life. So gut microbiota affects various aspects of human health. It can be your immunity, it can be your metabolism, it can be your neurobehavioral disorders like ADHD or autism. So incorporating prebiotics and probiotics regularly in the diet can ensure good microbial colony and hence good health. Yes, this is very important. Nowadays, I'm being a developmental pediatrician. We are also seeing a lot of deliveries when it happens. So nowadays, many of the gynecologists, they are being basically referring the antenatal mothers to a good dietitian for an adequate nutrition, because the health of a child can be considered, the health of the child basically starts from the period if you are able to maintain the health of the womb in a good condition. So a good womb, a better womb, a healthy womb will help in giving a bright future to the child. So this is a very good victim. And because of that, nowadays we are basically being referring, gynecologists are being referring a lot of, the antenatal mothers to the antenatal checkups, especially to the nutritionists and dietitians, so that they can modify their diet as per the needs, so that an adequate diet is given to them. And also those children who have been exposed to a lot of stress, the mother has been exposed to a lot of stress, it is advisable and it is not a bad idea if we can start with a probiotic from day one of life, and so that we are actually able to modify the microbial diversity to some extent, so that it can make the prospects of a child health better, and we can also reduce the chance of exposure to the child in terms of immunity, in terms of allergic conditions. So these are the lists, like microbial health, the birth delivery, antibiotic exposure. So these are very important factors which can affect the microbial diversity, as we have seen in our presentation today. So keeping the good health is very, very important, and reducing the early onset obesity among the children is very much important, because it can lead to further metabolic conditions like chronic, heart failures, cardiac diseases, heart problems, liver problems. So a lot of things can happen. So if we are able to keep the health of a child in an early neonatal period good by maintaining the microbial diversity, we can definitely make the future of a child better and bright. So it reduces the risk of neurodegenerative diseases like future Alzheimer, obesity, ADHD, autism. So gut microbiota is very dynamic, and any exposure to the changes in diet, environment, medicine, supplements, or the antibiotics can affect the microbial diversity. So you can see that the list is enormous, but keeping our discussion specifically to the terms of nutrition, nutrition itself plays a 60% role in keeping the gut microbial diversity very healthy. So we are able to focus on the nutrition, we are able to focus on MNT, that is medical nutritional training and therapies. We can definitely modify the remaining 40%, because antibiotics not being given to every person, it depends upon the scenario, but at least nutrition has to be given to each and every mother 100%. It plays a very important role. So that is why, taking into account the 60% of the role of nutrition, if we are able to maintain that, definitely we'll be able to modify the microbial diversity in a better way, and can make the future of a child much, much better and brighter. So with this, I would like to conclude about that. Yes, microbial diversity is very much important. And in today's scenario, in today's where there is a lot of stress and everything, nutritionists do play a very important role in maintaining the diet, in maintaining, looking after the nutrition of the antenatal mothers, and especially the newborns, so that we are able to maintain the diversity and promote the bacterial growth of the beneficial bacteria in a better way. So it's a teamwork along with the nutritionists, along with the gynecologists, along with the doctors like pediatricians and etc. But yes, nutrition is now considered to be a central role in maintaining the microbial diversity. Thank you. Thank you very much.